Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from June 23rd, 2023, and I'm recording this on December 21st, 2023. Happy holidays to all of you for whatever it is you celebrate. Before you get another one of these, we will be past Christmas and approaching the new year. As always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. This week, we're looking back at 18 books that can't hit those lists back at the end of June. And we're going to see what we can learn from them and, why they were relevant and what factors made them hot, what factors have caused them to cool off or stay hot, and what's going on with these particular books. So let's dig in and see what we can learn this week. First up, we got Coyote's #1 on the list for the second week in a row, but this time we're talking about the second print. Last week we were talking about the first print. This week we're talking about a hard-to-find second print because this comic has been in production for Amazon with Jordan Peele and Selena Gomez attached to produce. So back then this harder-to-find second print was going for $40. Now, the only recent sale is $25, and there are listings for, in that same range, but the only recent sale is a $25 sale. So this is down in a trap, pretty big drop down. You're only getting one sale, and down all the way from 40 down to 25 on the only sale you could get. So definitely a trap here. This may end up being a great show, but no recent news about it. Probably going to be a while before we get it. Next, we have Neona, #1. A little different than our typical entries. This is actually just a graphic novel. It was never published as a comic. It was always just a graphic novel. But the Netflix movie came out back then, which caused us to kind of spike, and they put it on the list. Graphic novels were going for $10 to $22. Now it's $10 to $25. Hard to tell for sure if this was... even I look back and stuff, and it wasn't really clear whether or not it was actually, they were talking about just first prints or anything. They just kind of talked about it in general, so that's kind of the prices I ended up using. So still basically right at the same price to track down this original graphic novel. Next, we have Something is Killing the Children, #1. Back on the list back then. This has obviously been a very hot book over the last several years at different times. And this was hitting the list again because there was a new story arc starting in the comic. Plus, we were getting, we got some updates that, yes, Tinian was saying, yes, we are still going to get a show from this. So that was caused it to hit the list. 9.8 of the first print jumped back up to $800 back then. Now it's still at $200 to $300 for a raw copy of the first print. 9.8 of the first print now, $575 to $700. So down and I'll be back compared to what it was. And really, this is about where this book seems to have settled in now. For the most part, it's in kind of these ranges if you want to track this down most of the time. We will see if we get new news. It might jump up again, but seems to have settled in and pretty solidly kind of in these ranges. Next, we're going to start moving into some covers. Our first cover this week is Street Fighter 6, #1, the Art Germ Virgin variant, limited to 400 copies. This Chun-Li cover was going for $120 right out of the gate on the secondary market. People were all about this cover. They were chasing it. That's big money, even for a limit to 1 to 400. Now it's a $45 to $75 cover. 9.8, which almost all the 9.8s were signature series that have sold. I think there was one that wasn't, and it actually went for more than some of the signature series ones. All the signature series ones are going for $300 to $400. This is down in a trap on that raw side at under $100, but still pretty good value for this cover, especially for those 9.8s at $300 to $400 on a book this new. That's pretty good value, even if it is down from the craziness at the initial release. All right, next we got Wonder Woman #799, the Raza foil variant that was limited to 1,000 copies. These DC foil variants don't have the best history of performing well once they hit the list. This one was going for $40 to $50 back then at release. Now it's a $20 to $45 book, so there are still a few sales up toward where it was at before, but for the most part, it's definitely taking a step back. 9.8 on this one, $75 to $200, which is a really wide range, and there's really sales throughout that range. So that was kind of a surprising spread on a book this new. Normally it's a little tighter than this, but yeah, so I would definitely look for a deal on this one. It's definitely an I'll be back compared to what it was, but I would definitely even within current sales, if you wanted this now, I'd be looking for the deal and trying to get on the lower end of these prices. All right, next we have Silk #1, the second print Peach Momoko cover. This is a 1 in 25 second print that was going for $50 to $75 back then, and now all the listings are for really big money. The only recent sale is for $250. No choice to call this straight cash. I do not understand this at all. I do not think this is one of her better covers. The only thing I could see here is it must be a bit of a ghost, because I can't imagine that many people ordered a second print, 25 copies of the second print of Silk #1. And also it's got a Disney Marvel crossover here on the cover with Tinkerbell and Silk. So I guess that's what's driving this, but I don't think it's a particularly great cover. But apparently people want a lot for it, and at least one person was willing to pay $250 for a raw copy of this. So, all right, next we're going to start to transition away from covers. We got one cover / comic buzz book here, and that is Void Rivals #1, the Danny Warren Johnson 1 in 100, on the list for the third week in a row. At this point, it was all the way up to $250 for this cover. Now and it finally got beyond what it was able to sustain. Now it's a $150 to $200 book, 9.8, $250 to $350. So it is a down, and I'll be back from that third week peak, which is, pretty typical that the third week peak is going to it won't be able to sustain that. Very surprising that it actually only took this big a step back. And normally it's a bigger fall from grace than that, from that third week peak. But this book is still, there's a lot of interest right now in this whole universe, in the Transformers and the G.I. Joe stuff. There's a lot of people that are chasing these books that are enjoying them. I'm hearing good things about the Transformers book. It doesn't really hold an interest for me. I watched the shows when I was a kid, but I'm not really that interested in going back and revisiting those universes, but for a lot of people are, and this is a series that people are getting behind and enjoying. So next we have The Sickness #1. So third week in a row we got a Sickness book, but 2 weeks ago we got this #1, the A cover. Then last week we got a variant on the list that didn't do as well as the A cover did, and now the A cover was back on the list at $15 to $25 back then for this hot indie. Now it's a $10 to $30 book, 9.8, 80 to 100. I really figured this would be kind of a trap. It was not. It's been pretty steady. I'll be back even at this level. You could almost argue worth it here, but there are, there's sales on both sides, so I consider that kind of an I'll be back. Like, you can find deals. But yeah, people are still chasing this book. People are still interested in this series. It's weird. I really haven't heard anybody talk about it from reading other than seeing it on these lists. So maybe I'm just not talking to the right folks on this one. Next, we got Hulk Annual #1, first appearance of Eldest in a backup story in this annual book. I'll be honest, I haven't been reading any of the Hulk stuff recently, so I don't know much what's going on with what the deal is with this Eldest character. But back then, it was just a $5 to $15 book for a new character. That's not unusual. Still a $5 to $15 book, 9.850. So yeah, it's been steady. I'm still calling I'll be back at these prices just because no reason to run out and get it even then. They're basically a $10 average sale for first appearance of a new character. It's not unusual. That's a pretty standard for just first appearance fee. The 9.8 going for $50. That's basically bare minimum to make any money on getting the book slabbed. So we'll see if this character becomes something. So far, not really. All right, next we have She-Hulk #3, the first appearance of Bailey Briggs, but not that Bailey Briggs. So this is a character that appeared back in 2004 and shares the same name with the new Spider-Boy character. So that's why people were chasing this book. Only this character is a middle-aged guy who passes away in this issue. And it's clearly not the Spider-Boy character. Yet people were chasing it back then for $20 to $50 for this. Dan Slott and everybody else in Marvel was saying, no, they're not the same. Just a coincidence of the name, not a big deal. And yet people are still paying $10 to $40 for this. I predicted a dumpster fire on this, but there's still a lot of sales over $20 here. This is really just kind of a steady and I'll be back, even though the high end's taking a slight step back, the low end's taking a slight step back. Most of the sales are within that range. in that $20 to $35 range, which makes no sense to me that this has managed to continue, even though there's literally no connection between the two characters other than they have the same name. But what do I know? Next, we have Ruins #1. This is an Elseworld story from Warren Ellis. That came out in the 90s. And yeah, like the internet, and I forget, I didn't write down the YouTube channel, rediscovered this existed. So there was a big buzz around this after somebody talked about it on the internet, and people were chasing it down. It cost raw copies of this book to go $25 to $75, which is just insane. And yet another one that's still doing better than I expected. I expected this to be a dumpster fire. It's now a $10 to $50 book, so it's still a trap. Like if you paid $75 and stuff, even if you paid $30, you probably could do better on that kind of grade copy and getting it for $10 now. But yeah, don't understand. These last two books, I don't understand sometimes how the market sustains them as well as it did. It's more of like people decided, well, we got sales for this, so we're going to keep charging this, and somebody's still paying it, I guess. I wouldn't, but that's just me. All right, with that, we're going to move into our only DC movie-related book this week, and it's Batman, the official comic adaptation, #1. Michael Keaton was back as Batman in the Flash movie, causing us to hit the list. Raw copies are only going for $12. 9.8, so we're pushing 300. No recent 9.8 sales to compare to. My guess is they've probably taken a step back from that 300, but nothing to compare to right now. But raw copies on this version of the book, there's two different covers here for this particular one, but this is the one that we were talking about. 5 to 15 now on raw copies. So overall, a down, and I'll be back. But yeah, be interested to see what a 9.8 would go for. But yeah, this movie did not. All the hype was this was going to be the best thing ever, and then this movie did not sustain that kind of support at the box office, at least. All right, we're going to keep moving. We got 3 MCU books plus 3 Sony Spider-related books. Not Across the Spider-Verse related, but Sony movie related. First up, we have Wolverine Origins, #10, the first appearance of Daken. And this was hitting the list because rumors that we would get him in the Deadpool movie back then. And interestingly enough, we got more recent rumors just this last week. So this book was just on the Hot 10 list again last Saturday or last weekend. So shockingly, this book is almost exactly the same price as it was back then. $50 for raw, 9.8, $340 back then. $50 raw, 9.8, $325 last week. We'll say in between, there was definitely a period where you could have gotten this for a little bit less. We're going to call this steady, and I'll be back, because you could have gotten it for a little less, depending on your timing here. But yeah, one of those things where it cycled back 6 months later and actually was back in the news, and people were back specking on this. Next, we have Secret Invasion #1. This is the first issue of the series, and basically the Disney Plus show was coming out with the matching title to this. So people were buying this book, $20 for raw copies, 9.8 hitting 170. Now it's a $5 to $15 book, 9.8 40 to 60. So definitely a dumpster fire here. You can argue part of this has to do with the show not being that well received. I would argue this is what happens, maybe not quite to this degree, but almost every time we get a book like this that has to do with the title or a storyline in a show or movie, as soon as it comes and goes, those books back up hard. Unless those storylines are also already beloved to the point that they maintain a pretty high value, they back up pretty hard as soon as the story's been told. So this is not unusual. And maybe the difference between a dumpster fire and a trap is that the show wasn't great, but it would have definitely done this anyway. Next, we have Meet the Skrulls, #1, the first appearance of Gaia, Emilia Clarke's character in Secret Invasion. Back then, raw copies, $8 average, so pretty cheap even then. 9.8, 80 to 100. No recent 9.8 sales to compare to, but basically we're still looking at a $5 average here, 2 to 10 on raw copies. So we're going to call this down, and I'll be back. But yeah, you could call it steady, I'll be back. Either way, but yeah, not a lot of interest in this character at this point, even though technically she's like probably the most powerful character in the Marvel Universe right now. Or at least very close. All right, next we're going to move into the Sony stuff. This was not, as I said, about Across the Spider-Verse. This was actually about the dropping of the Kraven trailer, or that we were going to get the Kraven trailer. I forget exactly what was going on here. No, it was the trailer. Okay. First up, we have Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man number 116, first appearance of the Foreigner, who was not seen, I don't believe, in the trailer, but is supposed to be in the movie. Raw copies were going for $40, 9.8 going for $230. And now it's a $5 to $25 book. No recent 9.8 sales here. That's a dumpster fire also. It's basically the average raw sale is under $20, which is under more than a 50% drop from that $40. Yeah, this is a character I doubt maybe it's going to be important in this movie, but I don't have a lot of faith in the Sony live action stuff at this point. So I'd be very much surprised if the movie and his portrayal ultimately changes the value in this book, and it is backed up. Next, the other thing to remember, as we've talked about now, that the trailer peaks are now recently have tended to be even higher than the movie peaks. By the time the movie comes out, the books are actually down from the trailers at this point, and that appears to be the case for the next two books. First up, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 41, first appearance of Rhino. We did get kind of a glimpse of Rhino in the trailer back then, causing a 6.5 to jump all the way up to $1,100, which is a big rise. There was just some other sales there that were hitting some all-time highs and stuff for Rhino, and now it's a 6.5 will cost you $525 to $675. That's a big drop in 6 months for a character that's about to be in a movie. Raw copies $100 to $450 on your range on the movie. So this is a trap from the trailer right now in terms of prices. Obviously, straight cash long term. First appearance of an early Spidey villain, sub 100 Spidey villain first appearance. That's a good bet on a book. But the dog is like snoring, making noises here. But yeah, definitely backed up huge, and I doubt it bounces back to the trailer heights even when the movie comes out. I'd be very much surprised. And our last book this week is Amazing Spider-Man number 15, first appearance of Kraven the Hunter. Obviously, it's his movie. 4.5 jumped all the way up to $1,050, which is going for big money. And now a 4.5 will cost you $600 to $900. We're putting it in the I'll Be Back, but we're borderline into the trap side. There was enough sales up toward the 900 that I put it in I'll Be Back. But there were a couple sales, $650, that kind of range that makes us, it's definitely into the trap range. Raw copies, $200 to $1,000 for this thing. So it's a great book. Long term, again, both of these last two books are straight cash. But right now, with the movie and everything, it appears this movie's probably gonna follow the same pattern we've seen recently. That the peak, if you were selling, it should have been at the trailer. The movie itself, you're actually gonna be able to do better. And then if this is another Morbius and it kind of bombs, another 6 months, year from now, this book will probably be these books will probably be as cheap as they've been in recent memory before they really start. They're going to bottom out somewhere and before they really start climbing back. So with that is this week's list. We had 18 books to talk about. Again, wish you guys a happy holidays, and we will catch you next time. Later.